Hey, good morning, guys. It is March 10th, and Chambers is teaching today from 2 Timothy chapter 4. For those of you who don't know, Timothy was a disciple of Paul, and he calls him his son. He treats him like a son, instructs him like a son, and so he's his spiritual son. And he often instructs Timothy and he says things to Timothy like, "Don't let people look down on you because of your youth." So Timothy was young, and so Paul's raising him up, and so he's talking to Timothy about chapter 4 is actually a really interesting one, and I'll jump ahead in chapter 4, and then come back to what Chambers deals with. But in chapter 4 it says, "The time will come when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear." And so Paul is just instructing Timothy, and he's saying, "Hey, make sure that you're preaching the word," and that is where Chambers jumps in today. Preach the word, and and he and Paul is instructing Timothy and says, be prepared to correct, rebuke, and encourage with with great patience and careful instruction. And so, preach the word is what Chambers focuses on today. It's interesting. A couple things stood out to me with Chambers is this first point that he makes about um, God did not send us as messengers. We're not just messengers. We're sons and daughters. And you think about what he could have sent the whole message of salvation through a messenger, like an angel, saying, "Hey, listen, here's how you're saved. Do this, and you'll be saved." Instead, he sent his son to live it out, to live out the message. His life was the message, and he does the same with us. We're set apart to live out the message with our lives. And Chambers has a bunch of different kind of word pictures here. One is this idea of our hearts broken by conviction of sin, baptized by the Holy Ghost, and crumpled into the purpose of God, which is a really interesting word to use when talking about the heart of a saint, crumpled into the purpose of God. But it really kind of, and not carelessly, you think about it, crumpled could indicate that God just kind of uses us up like a piece of paper, but it's not what he's getting at. I think he's getting at more of, again, the broken bread and poured out wine that he dealt with before. I like the last point he makes here. The very last sentence or paragraph says, let God have perfect liberty when you speak. Let God have perfect liberty when you speak. So that's an interesting kind of a let God speak through you. And he talks about the day of Pentecost. And what happened there was that the disciples learned to let the Spirit of God um, work through them, work in them. And before God's message can liberate other souls, the liberation must be real in you. And so, obviously, the vessel. Have you ever opened up a? It's funny. I just opened up a French press today. I was gonna. Pastor Fabian brought me some coffee, and I was gonna press it out in my French press. You open up the French press, and it's just a clean metal container, but it smells like coffee, and it's because somehow the coffee is infused into the metal. It's almost impossible to get it out of there after having put so much coffee into this metal French press. I think it's kind of what he's getting at here is it has to, before we can be used to pour out into other people, it has to make a difference in us. It has to kind of be infused into us, and the message has to take root in us and liberate us before it can ever have any hope of liberating others. He says, "Gather your material and set it alight when you speak." One of the things we talked about last night in Bible study when we're talking about evangelism is kind of have in your arsenal, your quiver, have some arrows, some ways in which you approach or broach, I would say, the gospel with people. have those ready, and then let God use them. But have them ready. Have a few ways in which you bring up the conversation or turn the conversation. So today, I think, and this week actually, we're going to be talking about ways we can evangelize, ways we can open up those conversations for more meaningful, kind of productive conversations. Anyway, you guys have an awesome day, and start thinking about ways in which you can not just be a messenger, but have the message take root in your own life first.